Welcome, everyone, to episode 96 of the Gully Blanchard podcast. My name is Ryan, coming to you from the continent of Northern California. It is a chilly, but not snowy like it is in Vegas and apparently parts of LA Thursday night as we record this. You can check out all 96 episodes of the Gully Blanchard podcast by going to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you pretty much get podcasts, Podbean, what have you. Apple Podcasts is where we are most downloaded by searching Gully Blanchard Podcast. You can rate, review, subscribe, check out all 96 episodes. This used to be a one-man show. To be honest, it wasn't very good because I had no idea what I was doing. Brought in two of my best friends. Shout out to Mark, who just moved to Philadelphia. Marcus, get well soon, buddy. We all love you. And we had some fun. We talked about all kinds of fun things. We just pretty much put one mic in front of the three of us, and we talked for an hour. And it was some of my favorite memories with those three guys that I've known for about 20 years. However, trying to get three men in their mid-30s in the same room together on a week-to-week basis proved a little bit difficult. Life gets in the way. Life happens like that. So I went back to doing a one-person podcast. I wanted to switch it up, and I just wanted to talk to interesting people about pro wrestling. Sports, music, what have you. Pro wrestling is something I think as of right now is as popular with adults as it's ever been, which is really weird because there's not the same transcendent stars that we grew up on. But I think it's as more popular and socially as acceptable as it's ever been. And that's a really cool time. And, you know, with the rise of social media, you get the chance to come across people that you'd meet all across the world. I mean, I've had guys on the show from Australia, Damian Slater. He was in the WWE Cruiserweight Classic. And I've talked to all different kinds of people across America, Canada, and just had really good conversations about pro wrestling. And, you know, that's always been kind of the goal, is to have fun with pro wrestling. If you guys are tuning in looking for a show that recaps Monday Night Raw or SmackDown, I give you my word, this will not be it. I just like to have fun conversations about something that is relatable. And I think it's something that translates really well. And again, all 96 episodes are also available at nocoastbias.com. Shout out to Derek. I have done some wrestling writing periodically, and some of that will be focused there as well. You guys can always go and check that out if you like. However, this week's episode is going to be one that I've wanted to do for quite some time. I remember the first time I found out this guy was a pro wrestling fan, and we're going to get into this momentarily, is I was at a Sacramento Kings basketball game. It was during one of the television commercial breaks, and this guy got on the microphone. He's the MC for the Kings, and he said, "Drink it in, man." And I looked at my best friend who I was there with, and I'm like, yo, he's a wrestling fan. Perfect. Because that's what it is. Like, you know, with wrestling, you can get one small thing, and it just automatically links you to that person. Because if he knows what that saying is, chances are he's a pro wrestling fan, and it just kind of spiraled from there. Really positive dude. I walked by him at Disneyland just out of the clear blue sky one day, and it was really cool just to, you know, you meet cool people on this app if you do it the right way. So I want to bring him in for episode 96. Scott Freshour is the MC of the Sacramento Kings. Man, welcome to the show.
Hey, dude. Awesome being here, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, man, I got to tell you, that was the first time I knew that you were a pro wrestling fan, dude. I remember I was in the stands, and I've told you this before, and I do mean it. Like, you guys, you and Scott Moak make the games so much more entertaining and so much more fun. And I was like, he just said, "Drink it in, man." Like, you could have seen like the eyes go, and I'm like, oh, he's a wrestling fan. I'm like,
yes,
oh, okay.
I'm a huge wrestling fan, and ironically, so is a good number of people that help produce Kings games, like the guy on the video board who does the big screen, our audio guys. So like when I do a lot of that, drink it in, man. Like, I'm doing it to kind of make them laugh, knowing that I don't think a lot of the audience picks up that it's a wrestling thing. So I'm really just trying to make the guys in the control room laugh.
That's really funny, man. It's funny. I could imagine that, like, you'll hear fans in the crowd that are wrestling fans, and like they probably have the same reaction I do. Like, yo, this dude's a wrestling fan, and like it's like that. It's like the Ooh Yeah, or like the Brother, or the Austin 316, or the Know Your Role. Like, if you hear someone say it, it like automatically like plants a flag on them that like this person either is or was a wrestling fan.
Oh yeah, hardcore wrestling fan since I've been 13 years old.
Cool, man. So where before we get into pro wrestling, because it's the main reason why I wanted to have you on, where can people follow you on social media? What do you do for those who've either never been to a Kings game or are not familiar with your work? How would you describe sort of what your role is with the Kings, and where can people follow you?
Sure, you can follow me on Twitter at Scott_Fresh and Instagram at Scott Fresh, just one word on Instagram. Yeah, man, and like you mentioned, I'm the MC for the Kings. My full-time job with the Kings is director of entertainment, so I kind of get to come up with a lot of the fun, quirky stuff that happens at timeouts, halftimes, intros. If it's really creative and funny, I made it. If you didn't like it, somebody else made it.
That's the best way to handle
Yeah.
responsibility right there.
Yes. So it's really fun from a creative standpoint. Myself and about 3 or 4 other people put together the program for a Kings game, what happens live in the arena. But I'm the only one that gets to play a character in that show. So it's almost like I'm Triple H or one of those guys. Like I get to play an on-air character, but I have a very big backstage role as well.
Cool.
So it's a lot of fun. And if you go to a Kings game, you'll see me. I'm kind of the guy that gets the crowd hyped up. I do the contests on the court. I do pretty much all the fun stuff. I think I have one of the coolest jobs in the world. And I draw a lot of motivation from WWE, honestly.
And what's funny is I've told you this through Twitter, and it is something I genuinely mean. Like, you guys do a lot of cool stuff with making those games fun. And I think one of my favorite ones was when the Warrior. It was right around the time where the Steph Curry did the moon land. Like, did we walk on the moon? It was the world flat. And I remember seeing that. I remember seeing the intro for the Warriors, and I was like, as someone who likes to come up with like creative things that are generally for like an audience of one, that like if you get it, you get it. I was like, I get what they're doing there, and I was like, oh, that's my team, like having some fun with that. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. I think it's more fun now than it's been in a while to be a Sacramento Kings fan. But I give you guys a ton of credit, man. You guys make the games. You guys make the stuff in between games that people may not pay attention to. You make it a lot of fun. So I want to make sure
We appreciate that.
So
we appreciate that, and it's part of our philosophy of making games fun and high energy is that if you keep things going during timeouts and engage during timeouts, the energy never drops. Like our goal is to never make it just be silent so that people kind of like catch their breath and get tired, right? We want to keep it like boom, 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 keep it fun and exciting the whole night.
Definitely, man. So I know you talked about being a wrestling fan at 13, but what were some of your earliest memories being a fan? Like what was going on when you first found pro wrestling? Who was the guys and girls you gravitated towards?
Sure. So, I mean, if you've never, if you see me now, you'll be like, damn, that dude is really, really outgoing. I'm pretty sure that's what people kind of think. Like, damn, he has a big personality. He's very outgoing. I've always felt like that inside. But when I was growing up through like middle school and very early into high school, like I was just really shy and I was kind of stuck in this shell. And I knew who I was inside, and I was this kind of outgoing, larger than life, like super loud kind of a guy. But I was like too afraid to kind of break out of my shell. So I remember being a freshman in high school, and it was probably around 99 when I first got into it. I remember I was just kind of this shy guy that kind of floated around groups in high school, and I didn't really. I was just very guarded. And so I remember one day this guy was like, dude, watch Raw tonight. Who do you like, Stone Cold or Rock? And I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. The only thing I knew about pro wrestling was like seeing like Macho Man on Slim Jim commercials. Like I thought that's what wrestling was. So I watched wrestling, and dude, like a lightning bolt, it just spoke to my true self. Like I was like, damn, these are over the top guys. These guys are outrageous. This is everything that I feel on the inside. I wish I could show it on the outside. And like, it's the weirdest thing ever, but my favorite wrestler of all time is badass Billy Gunn, dude. I don't know what it was about him at that time, but he was just this cocky dude. It was right when he became Mr. Ass, and he was a heel. He had just turned on Road Dogg, and I was just like, this is my guy. He's got attitude. He has swagger. He's a jerk. He's just cocky. I was like, this is the guy I want to be. This is who I want to be. And dude, I broke out of my shell halfway through my freshman year, like a cannonball out of a cannon, dude. And like my personality just kind of grew exponentially. I really stopped being shy at that point, and I really started becoming an outgoing person. And I just loved wrestling because it just spoke to who I was on the inside, man.
Now, and that's interesting because it's funny how everyone's got their favorites, like yours being Billy Gunn, and I've talked to countless people with different favorites, and it's always an interesting reason to why. Now, I'm curious, though, that did you, as you became a bigger fan, did you go back and watch some of the old, like, Smoking Gun stuff, or, like, the Rockabilly, or, like, how does that Billy Gunn compare to, like, the Billy Gunn that you're like, oh, wait, it kind of felt like in a weird, like, because to me, like, the Smoking Guns Billy Gunn was, like, the polar opposite of Mr. Ass and so I just wonder, like, how did you first absorb that where you're like, oh, wait, he wasn't always like this specific guy.
Right. As the internet got better and I was able to do more research, I learned about Rockabilly and the Smoking Guns. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's cool. But the character Mr. Ass was where it was at, man. Like, the ladies loved him. He was just a cocky jerk, man. And that's exactly who I felt I needed to be to break out of my shell. And, you know, for a little while, I was a cocky jerk growing up. And then I kind of, you know, pumped the brakes and kind of, you know, settled into who I was. And I got rid of the arrogance part of myself in freshman, sophomore year. But it's Mr. Ass that broke me out, man.
It's funny too, because he was definitely someone that, you know, a lot of the Attitude Era, a lot of those characters, you know, for every Stone Cold, I've always said for every Stone Cold, you know, there's 10 naked Midians, or there's 10, you know, artists formerly known as Gold. Yeah, like for every one of those, there's 10 guys, and you kind of look back and you're like, oh, I forgot about that inclination of that guy, or like whatever happened to the Truth Commission or stuff like that. But like, especially with Billy Gunn, he's always been someone that he's always stayed in phenomenal shape. He's never really had he's never really, I don't know, like sometimes you see the guys from that era, guys and girls, and you see him and they're wearing the effects, so to speak, like of that wrestling career. And like you look at Billy, and like one thing I've noticed from him, especially now with him getting a role with AEW, is he still looks like could still go down and give you a 20-minute match. Now, I don't know if that's just a testament to the training, but that's always been something that stood out to me with Billy, is like he's always looked in phenomenal shape.
Yeah, I don't know how he does it, man. It definitely motivates me, though, not to get a dad bod.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I mean, even Billy Gunn, like he had his good run in like the 2000s, and you know, he went his different ways and went through TNA and came back. But how exciting is it as a fan of him, like when he comes back for like Raw 1000 or like the 15th anniversary, or I think they just had Raw 25 when he came back at the Manhattan Center and did the thing with DX and all that, and they're going in the Hall of Fame. But like, was that your highlight of those moments, seeing him come back still in phenomenal shape and still looking like he can go?
Oh, yeah, dude. I honestly remember Raw 1000, and my wife is not a wrestling fan, but she's always been very, like she's just very kind with me about wrestling. She'll never watch it, but she always hears me talk about it. And I remember Raw 1000 at that time, like, you know, Road Dogg and Billy Gunn and X-Pac, they were kind of like not part of wrestling. You know what I mean? They weren't really mentioned. They were never really on TV. So when Shawn Michaels and Triple H kind of came out there, and I remember vividly, and my wife sat through this with me. She's a champ. And I remember them, Shawn and Triple H going, didn't there used to be more of us? They rolled out on the tank, and I was like, oh my God, babe, look, it's Billy Gunn, it's Road Dogg, it's X-Pac. Like, I just remember losing my mind. So, I mean, yeah, to see that he didn't look as bad as Road Dogg or X-Pac was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was funny because I remember that show too. That was the show where Punk turned on Rock, and you kind of turned it to that specific heel. I'll never forget that, because that was sort of the beginning of, you know, my favorite inclination of Punk. But back to Billy, like I remember them coming out on the tank, and like it's one of those good moments in pro wrestling. Like I had one recently watching Kofi in Elimination Chamber where like you remember what you loved about pro wrestling, like seeing all these guys back together. And I know, you know, Damien Sandow was the one who took all their finishers, and that in itself was pretty cool for him as well. It's just, those are some of the moments where wrestling becomes so much fun. Like even as an adult, you can kind of have that childlike, that zest towards it. You know, it's a fun part of pro wrestling.
Yep. It's what does it do? I'm trying to think of the word. It dispels your, gosh, I can't even remember what I'm saying, but it basically lets you just forget about everything that went on during your day. It disbelief. What is it called?
Suspending disbelief.
Suspending disbelief, baby. That's the best part of it, man. Right? Like when you're watching a good movie and you're just wrapped up in it. Wrestling has those moments, and I think that's why so many fans are addicted, because we keep waiting for those transcendent moments. You know what I mean? Like, that's why we're always watching and waiting for that next cool moment that you'll remember for the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, like I was telling you earlier, like I had just had one recently watching the Elimination Chamber. I remember watching it. I was watching it on my phone, and like every near fall, like I know the All-Star game was on at the same time. Excuse me, at the same time, and like every near fall that Kofi hit, I was like, "Is this it? Is this it? Oh, is this it? Is this it? Oh!" And then like when Daniel Bryan finally got the pin, I was like, I wasn't mad, but I was kind of sat back and I'm like, they got me.
Yeah, dude.
They did it again. Like they got me again. Like I remember having that with Punk and Cena. I remember having that with Daniel Bryan. On that same Mania, like I remember that when Taker lost to Brock the first time. I'm like, they got me again.
Or the one of those, the first one that I remember as a fan was when, you know, Chris Jericho went out to the ring, called out Triple H, made him put his title on the line.
Yes.
Nobody thinks Jericho's going to win the belt. You know, Earl Hebner gives that quick 3 count. Jericho wins the belt. Place is going nuts. And then, you know, they reversed the decision. But that was my first moment of like, oh, my God, this is radical.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is I went back and actually watched that Raw recently. And it's funny, too. And it's the beautiful thing when wrestling is done right. Like, even as an adult, like, you kind of know what you are and you're not watching. And I don't like calling pro wrestling fake because I do feel that from an athletic standpoint, it's the hardest of all the quote unquote sports or you know, wherever your line is with sports. Like, to me, I consider it a sport. I can hear the argument about it not, but to me, like, I look at a guy, we'll just say Seth Rollins, for example, and for him to do what he does, to stay in that kind of shape, him and Finn, like, those guys look like they could step onto a bodybuilding show tomorrow in place. And to be able to do that year round, you're traveling 300 days a year, you're going from gym to gym. Like, you think of them, those guys rolling into, like, say, Sacramento, right? It's the city where you work, where I'm from. You got to find the Golden One Center. You got to check into the hotel. You got to find a gym and you got to find stuff to eat. And then the next day, like, you're on the road to San Jose having to do that all over again.
It's insane. I do not understand that travel schedule. I just, like you said, I just came back from Charlotte and All-Star. It was a 10-hour flight from Charlotte. I had a layover in LA, made it to Sac. Dude, I'm still tired 4 or 5 days later. So I don't know how these guys live like this. And, you know, kind of a sidebar, like, I've become friends with Mojo Rawley recently.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, he's telling me stories about how he'll sleep 3 hours every 2 or 3 days. Like, he gets like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, like, over a weekend. And it's just a different breed of human that is able to do that. And at the same time, I do wish WWE would take care of their athletes the way every other sporting league does, right? Like, you know, get them a bus, get them in first class, you know, book their hotels. Like, it's surprising to me sometimes that they're still in that kind of independent contractor, book your own travels lifestyle. It just seems so archaic in 2019.
Definitely. And I wanted to bring up that schedule. I'll get back to Mojo in a second, but like, even watching the Penn State Raw where Jericho won the belt, like, even now, like, I'll be 35 next month. And like, again, like, we both kind of know what we're watching, whether it's, you know, a sport, not a sport, but even like knowing it was coming, just to see like that crowd reaction where like they all bought into it. Like, you can watch that match without commentary, with or without commentary, and you can feel it through the television. I think that's one thing that made moments like that, or certain moments in the Attitude Era, or even the era that we're in now, it makes it so much better where you can feel those moments coming across the television.
Totally, dude. It's an authentic experience, dude.
So I know you've gone to a couple of the shows in Sacramento. What were some of your favorite memories of checking out? I know you went to the most recent house show, if I'm not mistaken, because I remember I saw you and like Deuce Mason, who's been on the show before, really, really good guy. But like, I've seen you guys do a lot of cool stuff. But what were some of your funnest memories from those shows?
Dude, so one of the best perks working for the Sacramento Kings is I buy tickets the second they go on sale for any kind of event. And so I've literally sat front row at every Raw, SmackDown, any pay-per-view that's come through Sacramento for the last like 10 years. So it's usually like 2 shows a year. I have a blast every single time, man. I mean, I've been cussed out by Ryback, who I think was legitimately pissed. I used to heckle the guys, and I remember Ryback just got in my face and just tore me apart. And I was like, I I don't think he's joking.
Yes, that's hilarious.
And then I've had like, Cena jump out of the ring and he shook my hand once. Honestly, probably the greatest moment was when they were just here. They filmed in Sacramento 2 shows back to back. It was the week before Christmas and then the Christmas episode. And I sat front row, and I had just become friends with Mojo Rawley. And so like I hung out with a couple of the wrestlers, a couple days before Raw, and every one of them that I hung out with was kind of giving me winks or high-fiving me or giving me their shirts. And I just felt like the coolest guy on earth. Dude, it was the coolest, bro.
That's awesome, man. Because I know they run like they usually do like the Northern California loop, like they'll run like Oakland, Stockton, Sacramento, and stuff like that. But
yeah,
to be able to have that, like just to be able to like be cool with someone like Mojo, who I'm always a big fan of Mojo. Like I know he's going through sort of a character transition now, which I'm actually interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, me too.
And just like you said, like a guy like Mojo, who we'll call it what it is. He's not featured as prominently as I think he should, because I think he's got a lot of talent. And you look at a guy like that, and like I think sometimes fans are like, oh, well, like I've kind of forgotten about him. But like to go through something like that where you're getting 2, 3, 4 hours of sleep a night, and you're packed in rental cars, like it's just a different level of dedication that like I even as the biggest pro wrestling fan, even as one of the bigger pro wrestling fans, like I just couldn't picture like being away that often. It's just exhausting. And that's why I defend it so much when I hear people call it fake, because it's like these guys and girls are like on the road all the time, not to mention the bumps they take in the ring.
Dude.
Getting from like San Francisco to Oakland to San Jose to LA in like a week, like that's got to be exhausting.
Dude, it's what in Mojo specifically, because I have got a chance to get to know him. He's his get hyped mentality. It's a real mantra for him,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's not get hyped like let's get drunk and party. It's he gets hyped and works his butt off. Like I'm gonna get hyped and get my master's degree. I'm gonna get hyped and sleep for 3 hours for 4 days. Like he is so mentally strong that he's able to get hyped and work his tail off. And so like I'm really excited to see him kind of getting this push on Raw. Like, I'm excited to see where it could go for him.
Definitely, man. So I know we're coming up on WrestleMania season, and WrestleMania 35 is going to be headed to New Jersey, but I want to peel it back just a bit. Do you have any like favorite WrestleMania memories? I know there was 31 that was in Santa Clara, which I foolishly sat out. I decided not to go. I went to NXT. I went to NXT instead. I had a choice. I had just moved back from Vegas, and I was like, okay, NXT and Access or WrestleMania. And at the time,
NXT was hot, dude. That would be a tough choice.
Dude, I will go to my grave saying this. I had the choice to make. I looked at the WrestleMania 31 card and I was like,
dude, you're totally right. You're totally right, man, because that card was kind of whack. And I was kind of like, this is going to be kind of a regular WrestleMania. They didn't put too much into it.
Yeah.
But, dude, I saw DX versus NWO during that night. I saw Sting. I saw Rock, Ronda Rousey. Like, I saw Seth Rollins cashing in the main event. That was probably the coolest event I will ever go to. However, to your point, I really wish I would have been able to go to that NXT show, because that was right at its kind of like, it had just kind of hit that boiling point where it was like the show to see. And the love of my life, Sasha Banks, was on that card, and I didn't get to see her.
Dude, I got a story about that. So I through Twitter, I became friends with Damian Barling, who's also a huge wrestling fan.
Yeah.
And I found out, this was back when I was still in Sacramento, I found out Sasha was going to be at one of the cricket stores. And I remember hearing this, and Sasha's one of the loves of my life too. And we may have to duke it out at center court one day for that. But so I remember like she was in line for the cricket thing, and like Damien was really cool, and like he did a trivia thing, and I answered one of the questions right, and I think one of them was like, who has lost the most at WrestleMania? And I buzzed in, and it was not a question that like you would know off the top of your head.
Yeah.
And I buzzed in, and I got the right, like I was the first one to get to be able to answer the question to go meet Sasha.
Is it the Big Show?
Well, no, it was Triple H.
Oh, really? Interesting.
And what's funny is I was like, okay, who's been with the company really long? Like I'm doing this like rapid fire in my head. I'm like, okay, Triple H, Shawn, Taker. Taker's lost one. Shawn, Shawn was gone for a while. Okay, I'm going to go with Triple H. I'm going to take my chances because he's been there pretty much since WrestleMania 13. And I was like, Triple H. And he was like, oh, you're right. And I was like, wow. Oh, okay. Dude, so I went in there, and I always remember reading it. I'm always conscious of this because men can be a little creepy. Wrestling fans that are men can be a little odd. And that's not a knock. It's just kind of what it is. And like, I couldn't imagine being Sasha Banks and having to deal with some of that stuff. So I remember reading somewhere online. It could have been, fake. It could have been real. She was like, and I remember reading like Sasha has a no touching policy when it comes to men autograph seekers. And I was like, I totally get that because, for me, I can respect the boundaries, but I could imagine like another guy that's like, oh my God, you're the love of my life, and just making her uncomfortable. So I got it.
Totally.
And so I go in there and I go to meet her and like I shake her hand and like I make like a quick reference to Boston just because like I know that's where she's from. And I went to take the picture and like she put her arm around me and like I was like, oh, I made it. I'm good. Like I'm good forever. And I got the picture. I got to meet her and she was super cool. But that you were right. Like that was when NXT was really becoming like to me, I think it's sort of like at the time, I think it was like the underground rap group that you hoped made it big. And now it's kind of like the underground rap group that made it big, but kind of stayed what made them special. But like, I remember being there and like, it was Sasha against Charlotte. It was the first time a Tommy hit the GTS. And I remember leaving the San Jose State Arena thinking like, okay, cool. Like I made the right choice. Like I saw Sasha, I saw Charlotte. I did it. Like I made the right call. Like how smart am I? And then I remember sitting on my friend's couch, my friend Mark, who just moved to Philadelphia. I remember sitting on his couch watching Rollins cash in.
Yeah,
I was like, oh God, what was I thinking? So you were, I assume I'm correct in saying that you were at the actual event?
Yeah, I went to that event, and I hate to rub it into you, but through my relationship with the Sacramento Kings, I was able to finagle 2 front row seats to the Raw after that Mania at the Sharks Stadium.
Oh, SAP Center, yes.
My WrestleMania weekend was pretty epic, dude.
Dude, so I got to know, like, put me there when he cashed in. Like, because what's funny is every time I go to Levi's, I don't know if you do this yourself, but every time I go to Levi's, I look for the Pepsi thing because that was the backdrop to where he cashed in.
Right.
And every time I'm like, okay, like, I try to do it in my head, like, okay, he ran down here. He cashed in. There's that moment where like he's swinging the belt over his head like it's like a chain.
So awesome,
and I always remember that Pepsi sign at Levi's. So like, dude, put me there. Like, what was that? What was that like watching him cash in at 31?
So I mean, WrestleManias are really long, and like I get it. Like the crowds get tired, man. And there was a lot to cheer early on in that show, man. Like you got to see that RKO where Seth went for the curb stomp. Yes. Dropped him with the RKO. We got to see DX come out and interfere in that, Sting versus Triple H match, and then NWO comes out, and then The Rock comes out, and Ronda Rousey. I mean, there was tons of moments. So by the time we were getting close to that main event, I remember it was Bray and Undertaker, and the crowd was starting to get tired.
Yes.
Man. And like, there wasn't much of a reaction for that match. And then I remember Brock, Roman, and I always read the spoilers, and I remember them saying like, maybe like I'm trying to remember. Like, they were saying maybe Roman was hurt or something like that. And so, the entire crowd was like, "Oh, this is gonna be a short squash match." And it started out, and he was getting, he's getting whooped up, and we're just like, "Oh, this is a terrible way to end a WrestleMania, dude." And bro, when Seth Rollins' music hit, it was a collective. It was a combination of people going absolutely nuts because they knew it was about to happen, and because people knew that the match was just got saved, because that was kind of a dull match. I mean, if you remember, it was it was Brock just beating the heck out of Roman, and then Roman had a little bit of comeback, and then there was kind of laying around. And dude, when Seth Rollins' music hit, bro, the place erupted. It was electric. It was probably one of the coolest things, dude. I saw a main event of WrestleMania with a Money in the Bank cash in. It was radical, man. Like you'll probably never see a cash in at the main event of Mania ever.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like that was I remember specifically. Like that was the first time like that had been cashed in there. And, you know, WrestleMania 30 was iconic for its main event moment with Daniel Bryan in that moment with the shot. But like, I would argue the last couple WrestleManias since 31 haven't really closed out with the best moments. Like, I think that was like the last great ending to a WrestleMania, because like I remember sitting there watching them like, okay, like this match is cool. Like I'm actually in the group that I liked the match for the story that it told, because it showed Roman as a guy that like Brock couldn't just go in and like he could dominate him, but he couldn't keep him down.
Right.
And I think on TV and like on the network, it came across maybe a little bit different than in the crowd, which I would totally see the difference. But I remember watching, like hearing Rollins' music go, and I'm eating the chili that we had made, and I'm having a drink, and I'm just sitting there like, oh, I'm on the couch. Like, what am I doing? Like, and like it was weird because it was like a collective, it built up. Like, I remember watching the Rollins Orton match with the RKO, and like that was one of the more creative RKOs I'd seen. But you know, that one, the Evan Bourne one, and the most recent one, Mustafa Ali. And I remember sitting there being like, okay, like that was pretty cool. Like the ladder match was really fun. And then it kind of dipped after the Triple H and Sting match. Because for me, like, I wasn't a big fan of Bray Taker, just because like I thought it should have ended for Taker at 30, and I just wasn't a big fan of the story. Like, I thought those were spots where the guy that's there 365 days a year needs to win. So I kind of went into it and I was like, whatever. Like it's their company, they're going to do what they want. And then watching Seth cash that thing in, I'm like, oh man, I'm at home. Like, this was horrible. But no, for you to be able to be there, man, that's awesome. I think that's definitely one of the moments that like you remember where you were when that happened.
Totally. And speaking of Seth Rollins, tying it back into the Sacramento Kings, we actually use his music for we call it pump ups.
Yes, you do. I'm one of the only ones to get it.
Seth Rollins music, and instead of saying "burn it down," I say "make some noise." And
you know what? I remember it. I remember you guys doing it, and what's funny is I remember because like I'm up sort of in the East Bay now, but I can listen to some of the games on the NBC app, and they'll come back from break, and I can hear it, and I'm like, that's my city, man. Like I love that kind of thing. It's like a different kind of pride you get, because it's like, oh man, like I love that. Like, how cool is that like the city that I grew up most of my life in, the basketball team that I'm a huge fan of, like they get me. They get the Seth Rollins thing. It's like one of the coolest things in the world to have that. And I know I've been to a couple A's games, and like I know Josh Reddick used to come out to wrestling themes, and that was so cool too. And like it is something I think now more than ever, and I don't know if it's due to social media, because you can essentially with social media, when it's done the right way, you can control your news feed, and you can pretty much, if you don't like something, you don't have to follow it. And like,
absolutely,
I tie that back to wrestling, to where like you can interact with all these different wrestling fans, and like to hear something like that. Or I remember I was at it was the California Classic, I think it was at Golden One, where it was Sac State against Portland, and it was Kansas State. It was Kansas against somebody. And I'm drawing a blank on who it was. But I wore my NWO red and black satin jacket to the game because it was freezing that night. And someone just stopped me like on the concourse and just hit me with like a too sweet. Wasn't wearing wrestling stuff, stopped his conversation to see that. Yeah. And it's like, yo, man, like I know what that is, you know what that is. And I think that's such a fun time that we're in with pro wrestling now, because like we're all adults and we all grew up with these memories, and like it's just so cool. Like you feel like you just make like an instant friend.
Wrestling fans are like that, dude. If I find out somebody that I know likes wrestling, we're immediately friends. And like that's not the case with like other sports, right? Yeah. There's something about us wrestling fans. We're a different breed, man. Like, and any chance I get to talk wrestling with somebody, I'm taking it, because nobody in my really close circle of friends likes wrestling. So I'm eager to talk about it at all times.
Man, so what were so between WrestleMania, let's go from between WrestleMania 14 to 31, like what were you watching wrestling wise then? Because I know for me personally, like in my 20s, I kind of fell out of it just because it was really hard to keep up with being in your 20s and that. But did you ever have a phase where like you went out of wrestling and came back in, or have you always been consistent like week over week with watching it?
You know what? I've been pretty dang consistent from freshman year in high school till now. I've pretty much watched every Raw, SmackDown, maybe not every pay-per-view, because before the network, I wasn't really going to dish out bucks for a pay-per-view. But
Definitely.
There was a time freshman year of college when I came to college that I didn't have access to the USA Network or TNN, whatever it was on at the time. And so like I would still like read all the results and everything like that. But that was kind of the era where like Shawn Michaels came back and had a feud with Triple H, and it was kind of like the beginning of the Cena era. And I remember that was the time where I was a freshman in college. Like the world is brand new, but I still would read up on stuff. But other than that, man, I stay loyal to that brand, man.
So you bring up a good point with Cena, where Cena is one of the more polarizing guys for adults in this generation, because a lot of adults are going to cling to Stone Cold and Rock, or some even before that are going to cling to Hogan. But like, where do you come out of it with Cena? Like I find for what Cena's done, and I say this because if you look at a guy like Austin, who is one of the top guys of all time, he was really at his zenith from like WrestleMania 13 to WrestleMania 17. Like he wasn't there for 18, 19. He came back a month before and was shouldn't have been there, but was. I think that's one of the odd things about wrestling, to where it's like, hey, if you go do this, you're going to break your neck. Oh, but it's Mania. But for me, like Cena's been there from WrestleMania 20 full time to like WrestleMania 33. Yeah. And to be able to keep that kind of longevity in that kind of sport where it's really based on the fans, and the fans can sour on you quickly. And we don't come from a generation or where these guys don't really stay on top for 13, 14 years. So
right.
Where do you come out of it with Cena? Because I think he's one of the best of all time, but I've heard a lot of arguments on the other side. I've heard arguments for it, but I want to get your thoughts on Cena.
I agree with you. I think he is one of the best of all times. Whether wrestling fans really want to admit that or not, like everyone said it, he's the Hogan of our generation. In 10, 15 years, it'll be kids going, oh yeah, Cena was the guy I grew up on, right? Like yes. Us, I'm 34. You said you're about to turn 35. Like, actually, we're both 34, but we grew up Attitude Era, and those guys will forever be our heroes, right? Or at least for me, Attitude Era was for me. I think kids will feel the same towards Cena. Cena is interesting. Like, I think wrestling fans in general, like, we're already kind of in this subculture already that we already are kind of admitting to ourselves that we're not the most popular people, or you know what I mean? Like, we're always that kind of punk rock, you know what I mean? Yes. Like, we're counterculture. And so it is hard to cheer for a top guy like Cena when wrestling fans are kind of programmed to be counterculture. And so when you're getting fed Cena, you're like, this isn't who we want to see. Like, but I'm able to look at his work as a whole and just be like, damn, this guy is the man, right? Like, I remember seeing him at a gym, and this was before I read that they hated people coming up to them and interrupting them while they work out.
Yeah.
He stopped his workout. He shook my hand. He was very polite. And now that I'm a father and I'm able to kind of see things as a parent in how much certain things mean to kids. So like going to Disneyland, when I bumped into you at Disneyland, man, my son, he loved every second of that.
Yeah.
And so like, I look at a guy like Cena who works his butt off and then does everything he can for those kids. I actually have a legitimate respect for John Cena, and I'll defend him. Is he the guy that I always wanted to see in the main event? Probably not, but he's worked his butt off to earn everything he's gotten, dude. And so I would definitely put him on, like, maybe not a Mount Rushmore because that's your top 4, but I'd definitely put him in the top 10 of all time.
I agree with what you said in the sense where I don't think this generation really understands, what Cena was. And there was that lull from like WrestleMania 23 to 27 to where, Cena was kind of he was the tallest grass on a short lawn, so to speak, to where somebody had to main event it and it made sense. But, around WrestleMania 29 to now, like, Cena's done so much. And for me, I look at guys that are main eventers, that are guys that have defined the pro wrestling. And I look at, okay, who did they get ready to have? Who did they get ready to be there next? And I can't tell you, like, when Cena was doing that US Open challenge, like he was having excellent matches with guys like Cesaro or Cody Rhodes or Sami Zayn, matches that he didn't have to have, in a sense to where, like, guys at that level don't need to really give a lot of shine to the guys they're in the ring with. They're there to look impressive because WWE's always really been a one-man territory, whether it be Hogan, Austin, Rock,
Right.
Cena, Reigns. And the amount of work that he did to give back to pro wrestling has always been something that's been really impressive to me. And, one of my favorite 2 feuds that he had were, if you go back and watch the feuds he had with Edge and CM Punk, he legitimized both of those guys.
He really did.
Just not necessarily by beating them every night, but just he showed them as being credible opponents. I think that's what I think a great pro wrestler does. And I think Cena's been someone who I get an adult fan being like, well, I want a guy that has edge and I want him to turn heel. But to me, like you said, as a father, like, it's not about us anymore in pro wrestling, because to me, if we sat through the great Khali eras and we sat through some of the tough times, like, we're always going to be there. Like, I don't think WWE can do anything that's going to get me to cancel the network subscription or stop watching Raw or stop watching SmackDown.
Totally.
But I look at the fans that are your son or other friends of mine that have kids or stuff like that. And I'm like, I'm glad they're seeing a guy like John Cena, which I wouldn't have understood that as much at 25 as I do now.
Absolutely, dude. He's going to be this young generation's Hogan, dude.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to remember him forever.
Absolutely, man. So I want to wind this down. I know the Kings are playing the Warriors right now and stuff like that, but a couple questions I always ask everyone. I want to ask you this one specifically because of where we bumped into each other. What is your favorite ride at Disneyland?
Honestly, like my lifelong hero outside of Billy Gunn is Indiana Jones. So like I want to be Indiana Jones when I grow up. So like I love the Indiana Jones Temple of Forbidden Eye. However, that Guardians of the Galaxy ride is slowly taking that top spot, man. I just laugh and cry like a kid on that one, man. I love it.
I'm the same way, but what's funny, we can tie this back to wrestling with Indiana Jones. When Jake the Snake turned heel on the Ultimate Warrior, and he locked him in a room full of snakes, I've never been able to be okay with snakes to this day. And I know you know where it's going to get to with the Indiana Jones ride, but I remember watching the Jake the Snake DVD when I was 21. I was like, I'm adult. I can buy Coronas at 7-Eleven. That 7-Eleven, I'll send her a Mac. Like, I'm a man. And I put in the extras of the Jake DVD, and one of them was this skit where he locked the warrior in a room full of snakes. Dude, I couldn't sleep for like a week. I just kept the lights on for like a week. So I fast forward all that to where like every time we go on Indiana Jones, I know the snake's coming, and I still have to look away. And I know it's animatronic. I just can't do it, dude. It scares me every time.
That's awesome, man. I'm also a Star Wars fanatic. Like I'm just very obsessed with WWE, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and everything in the Marvel universe. So I do love what they're doing with Marvel at Disneyland, but Star Wars is my jam, dude. So I used to love Star Tours. I'm getting older now. Now I just get sick on it.
That happened to me.
I can't do it, but I'm excited for the Galaxy's Edge to open up.
You know what's funny? I've got a sleeper from my favorite ride, and it's because Disneyland Like Wrestling brings in the kid out of me. Yeah. I still love the Roger Rabbit ride.
Dude, I've only been on that once. And I remember as a kid going, I didn't really like it. So I haven't been on it since.
Dude, every time we go, like, I gotta go do Roger Rabbit. Like, it's gotta be like one of the first things I do. Like, it's the jump ball to my Disneyland. It's like the tip off. Like every time we go to Disney, and be like, I gotta go do it.
It
never fails. Man, what was the last thing you watched on WWE Network?
Ooh, over the last few months, I've been rewatching Raws. I found the Raw that I first watched, and I've kind of been catching up. But dude, I'm one of the few people that thinks the Edge and Christian show is awesome.
Oh my God, it's the best thing on the network.
I love it, man. I love Adult Swim, Tim and Eric kind of humor, and like it's almost like they combined that weird, bizarre Adult Swim with my wrestling fandom. So I really enjoy it. I think the last thing I just watched though, I'm rewatching the what's it called? Monday Night Wars docu series.
Those are fun. I like those.
They're just really good, man. And I've watched them before. I'm gonna watch it again. Like, that's how good it is.
So I had Deuce on the show, and I asked him the same question I'm going to ask you.
Juice and I talk about wrestling all the time.
I can imagine.
Like three desks down from me. We talk wrestling nonstop. That's my dude right there.
He's such a cool dude. Like, he was super nice to me. He was super nice on the podcast, man. Gave me a lot of time, and we had a really good conversation.
He's a genuine person. That's how he is, man.
Yeah, dude. He really was. Is De'Aaron Fox the top babyface in the Sacramento territory right now still?
He's got to be, man. He's got to be. But, man, I think Buddy Hield and Marvin Bagley might be kind of the Finn Balor's and the kind of that second tier of babyface.
Man.
For sure.
This has been a ton of fun, Scott, but I want to give you the chance to let people know where they can follow you on social media. So the floor is yours to let people know where they can check you out.
Sure. I'm actually a lot more active on Instagram. It's just Scott Fresh, one word. I am on Twitter sometimes, and it is Scott_Fresh there.
So if you guys get a chance to get out to a Sacramento Kings game, man, this is the guy that keeps you entertained through all the timeouts, all the minutia, all the TV timeouts that we see on TV, man. So this has been a long time coming. But you can check out this episode. This is episode 96, as well as all the other episodes I did with my friends Mark and Marcus. Interviews like I've done with Deuce Mason, who is the play-by-play guy for the Stockton Kings, also of the Deuce and Mo podcast. Josiah Williams, who just went down to NXT to visit. He is one of the guys who does Wrestle and Flow, which is he raps over wrestling themes, which is really creative.
Oh, he's awesome.
Yeah.
I just saw him the other day. I just saw his channel the other day.
He is really cool, really creative stuff. Big Pooh from my favorite hip hop group as a kid, Little Brother, Rich Fan from Pro Wrestling Torch. There are a ton of different guys and girls that have been on this podcast. It has really brought it. Stack Guy Greg was my most recent guest. He's on ESPN Cheap Heat. This is everything that I wanted the podcast to be when I dreamed it up, man. So you can follow me on Twitter at Gully Blanchard, which is GULLYBLANCHARD. No Facebook, no Instagram, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you get podcasts by searching Gully Blanchard. And yeah, all 96 episodes will be there. Scott, this was everything I wanted the podcast to be when I first started it up, man. So thank you so much for your time. This was really cool, man.
I had a blast, dude. Let's do it again.
Definitely, man. So I'm looking forward. I know you're a Kings fan. I know you grew up in the area, man. I'm looking forward to, if we get that 8 seed, we get that 7 seed. Down. We gotta bring back. I don't know if you remember this, the old Rattle Seattle placards, or the old Raz the Jazz placards that they gave out. We got to find a way to, like, I can't find those on eBay anywhere. I think it's one of the biggest crimes that those don't exist, man. But I'm looking forward to the moment to where the Warriors or whoever the 2 seed is walk into Golden One Center. And I've told people this, don't let that game get close in the fourth quarter, because that stadium is going to rock, man. And I know that I'm excited to see where the second half of the season goes for the Kings.
I'm telling you, man, if we make it to the playoffs, it's going to be hotter than an Attitude Era Monday Night Raw, bro.
That pop for De'Aaron and Buddy Hield is going to be amazing.
Big time.
Scott, man, thank you again very much. We'll be back next week. Until then, you guys all be good to each other, and let's have fun next week too.